Hi there, my name is Dan, and welcome back to All One, the United Anatomy of Being. This is episode 26, called The Mind, ... and a Heart. So, an extremely important level of being to understand for increased consciousness, or certainly on the path to increasing consciousness, of our whole being rather than just part of it, is the mind and how the mind functions. Certainly, humans have a fairly strong level of consciousness about the mind because we are well into the mind level of being. We use our minds every day and are fully conscious of the power of thinking. But while we have awareness that we think and that thinking is important, we may not be fully aware of how the mind operates, particularly on the subconscious and unconscious levels that are highly affecting our conscious thoughts, even our feelings, our behaviors, and the ultimate actions and outcomes in our lives. So, what is the mind? First, let's ensure that when referring to the mind or the heart in this context and throughout this series, and as it relates to spirituality, it does not mean the brain or the blood pumping organ we also call heart. The brain and this blood pumping mechanism we call heart are part of the physical body. They are visible and tangible organs that are part of the physical level. The actual mind is an intangible and invisible thing. It is energetic, and it is the cognitive level of consciousness where we process information, think, perceive, differentiate, judge, decide, believe, remember, and envision. The brain, on the other hand, this physical mechanism, consists of nerves, neurons, blood vessels, neural tissue, and fluids, and is really like the hardware of a computer that physically enables all the energetic or non-physical capabilities of the mind. Like everything else that is physical, the brain and all its components are nothing more than a collection of various atoms and molecules arranged in unique and very complex ways. And the human brain is one of the most complex physical things in the universe, at least of which we are currently aware. Scientists, for example, have discovered the physical hardware of the brain consists of about 100 billion nerves. That's right, 100 billion nerves that can transmit electrical current or energy through neural connections called synapses. Like a computer, this hardware results in the amazing capability and capacity for energetic action, for energetic transfer of information, and for the capability and capacity for outcomes on the physical level and consciousness that enable the mental capability to perceive, interpret, and direct energy. Again, we have awareness of this energy and this energy that created the physical level, and we thus have awareness of our physical existence. We can process information, we can think, we can perceive, differentiate, judge, decide, believe, remember, and envision. We have awareness and can do all these intangible, non-physical things, these energetic things, with the perceptual tool we call the mind, which is different than the physical tool of the brain that is required for it to happen. And as already well introduced, the mind's dominant but certainly not sole function is to perceive separating energy and to differentiate in order to comprehend all of the different things in existence. This critical capability of perceiving separating energies or perceiving differences is what enables the consciousness or awareness of anything physical that we experience. Without this capability, we would know nothing. We would remember nothing, and we would be unable to comprehend anything, including the perceptions from the physical perceptual tools of sight, sound, smell, taste, and the physical feeling in the form of touch. And we are incredibly fortunate to have a mind and to have this ability to perceive the separating or differentiating energies. But we do not need a mind to survive, or at least we do not need mind-level consciousness to survive. Many living beings do not have the same capability. We need a brain, though, and so do all mobile living things, at least all mobile living things on land and air, and almost every mobile living thing in the sea. The simplest beings without brains still have nervous systems, and the brain is just a very complex nervous system that again allows the transfer of energy within a being. Remember, energy is what enables anything physical to be, and the transfer or communication of energy is what enables anything physical to do anything beyond just physically exist, or to just be only on the physical level, such as to move, breathe, or pump blood through the body. And while non-mobile life, such as plants, for example, do not really have nervous systems, plant cells can generate electrical pulses which allow the same flow of information or energy that enable something physical to do something or anything more than just exist as passively as a rock. As physical existence evolved or developed, more and more complex unions of atoms allowed for more and more complex systems to communicate information and energy. This in turn enabled more complex ways of existing, which led in an evolving manner from single cell organisms to multiple cell organisms to invertebrates in the ocean to vertebrates in the oceans to plants and flowers and fruits and vegetables to amphibians that climbed out of the water to birds and reptiles and mammals and ultimately to humans. This evolution, or the undeniable growing complexity of the union of atoms, is what created the growing capability for the consciousness that we can employ and enjoy as humans. Now, let's talk a little bit about the heart. The heart organ, just like the brain, is also part of the physical body. It is made up of vessels, valves, muscular walls, and a small number of neurons, all for the primary function or primary purpose of oxygenating and pumping blood through the body. It ultimately, like the brain, is made up of atoms and molecules. It is visible, tangible, and completely physical. The heart, or heart level, as referred to here almost exclusively through this series, is the energetic feeling center as opposed to this physical organ. And we all know that we have feelings and that they are different from thoughts. We have all experienced happiness, sadness, passion, depression, anger, surprise, frustration, and hopefulness, among many other feelings or emotions. But more importantly, we have all experienced fear and love, which, as was introduced in the introduction and will be discussed further on, are the two most primary and fundamental heart level feelings. Now, humans, and science more specifically, know less about the heart and the feeling center than we do about the mind, which is natural because we currently exist most dominantly on the mind level. But the heart and its feelings and emotions are constantly being studied. Scientists now do know that feelings exist primarily in the brain, or at least are sourced in the brain, similar to thoughts, but in a different area of the brain. For a long, long time, humans thought feelings existed in the physical heart, most likely because of the effect emotions and feelings have on this physical organ. As you're aware, there are changes in the pace of our heartbeats when we experience different emotions. For example, the physical heart pumps faster when we become angry or extremely passionate or excited or fearful. Or we may feel the heart is light and fluttering when we are in love. This is one of the reasons that feelings and emotions are associated with the heart and referred to as the heart level, even though they do occur mostly but not exclusively in the physical brain. It is also important to, I think, point out that physiologically, the brain and the physical heart are very much connected. In fact, they're inextricably connected, as much as the mind level and the heart levels are connected, and as much as the separating and uniting energies are connected. And not only are these two critical parts of our physical body connected, but so is our gut, which is probably important to point out because it relates to instinct. Science has discovered that there is a very real connection between the gut and the brain, and that the gut contains over 500 million neurons, which is a lot less than the brain, but actually more neurons than exist in the physical heart. There is also a nerve called the vagus nerve that physically connects the gut to the brain. And science and human experience certainly have proven that gut health directly correlates to physical health, mental health, and emotional health. And if you think about it, we have all directly experienced that what we digest, be it fruits, vegetables, meat, sugar, modern processed foods, alcohol, medicinal drugs, recreational drugs, water, smoke, or even the lack of anything, can have a direct impact on not only the way we feel physically, but the way we think and the way we feel emotionally. So, whether we are aware or not, there is an undeniable and scientifically proven connection between the mind and the heart, but of course also between the mind, the heart, and the gut, which all contain neurons. Let's explore this a bit more. First, living beings have successfully existed for long before the development of the brain, the mind, or the activation of mind-level consciousness. All animals and early humans had to rely on instinct, which are essentially feelings regardless of whether there is any mental awareness or consciousness of them or not. And it's also important to remember that the primary goal of any living being is to survive, or to keep on living, or maybe perhaps at our highest unconscious level, is to at least successfully traverse the full arcing trajectory of the model of physical level motion and existence. And the primary requirement for survival is sustenance, meaning the need to find food and eat. Because the physical body, first and foremost, needs fuel or energy. So it shouldn't be much of a surprise that beings that need to eat and have the capability for mobility, meaning they have the required action to go out and find food and to eat, unlike plants which more passively obtain sustenance, might be driven by the gut and a feeling for the need to eat as a non-mental form of communication for how to survive. The second most important requirement for survival is the avoidance of lethal harm, or for that matter, harm in general, because non-lethal injury can certainly affect a being's ability to find food and survive. Again, well before any mental development, and particularly before any mind consciousness, avoiding harm or death was driven by the feeling of fear. We now refer to this instinctual feeling of avoiding harm as a flight or fight response that is triggered upon the input of perceived harm. Scientists have also determined that there are only two innate human fears, meaning fears we are born with, which are the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Both of these are instinctual fears, and again are in response to the potential for harm or death. And as I think falling is quite obvious risk for harm or death, and loud noises are often a precursor to the potential for harm, at least historically and traditionally for tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. Maybe that's not quite the case in our modern world, where there are loud noises, perhaps in many places, particularly big cities, but yes, loud noises were often a precursor to harm or death. Animals, as well as humans, have certainly developed many more instincts since their origin of existence. And for examples, how does a female salmon or sea turtle know how to return to their place of birth to lay their eggs upon maturity? How do spiders know how to build such complex webs? How do so many male animals know how to court and attract females for reproduction? How do bees know how to communicate a food source to their hive? And how do newborn mammals, including humans, know how to root for the mother's breast immediately after birth? And if you have a child or have experienced childbirth, this can happen within seconds or a minute of the newborn being in the mother's arms after birth. These are all instincts, which are essentially feelings on how to survive that existed in beings well before any development of the mind. They are not learned behaviors, do not require the development of the mind, and do not require consciousness. And scientists have studied instinct for a long time, but simply do not yet have, or really a proven understanding of the mechanics of instinct and the resulting non-cognitive feelings like they do for the cognitive mechanisms of learning, for example. There are certainly theories, of course, such as ancestral learning, which is information that is passed down from generation to generation in the DNA of a living being or a species. And while the physical mechanics of instinct and feeling in general occur in the physical brain, what is most important here is that these behaviors are not driven by thought. They are driven by feeling and have existed well before mental development. And it has already been well suggested or demonstrated that feeling exists at a higher level than thought. Thought exists at a higher level than action, and action is informed and directed by thought, while thought is informed and directed by feeling. It has also been suggested and demonstrated that without mental capability, action can be directed or driven directly by feeling, as also evidenced by the examples of instinct. And we have certainly all experienced this in moments of intense anger, passion, or even bliss, where we act without thinking. We have also experienced this through instinctual feelings that, despite our maturity and mental development and mental consciousness as individual living beings, they still exist and of which we can have awareness, such as feelings of instinctual fear, gut instinct, or intuition in general. Another critical point regarding the mind and the heart is the interaction between the two. It has already been suggested and reiterated several times that for the non-physical to have manifested into the physical level, where we and everything around us exist, these two primary uniting and separating energies had to exist and interact with great balance between them, but with also a slight dominance in the uniting energy, noting as part of this demonstration is that it is at a higher level than the separating energy, but a slight dominance in the uniting energy as it had to exist prior to the separating energy, because for something to separate, it does need to already be united. It has also been suggested that the mind is the dominant tool of perception for separating energy, and that the heart is the dominant tool of perception for uniting energy. Said a little differently, thought is the language of separating energy, and feeling is the dominant language of uniting energy. So, while uniting energy existed prior to separating energy and drove the creation of separating energy, and feeling existed prior to thought and drives thought, both are essential for the manifestation of action in beings with consciousness, particularly action that contributes to the highest probability of successful survival and the highest probability of happiness. And there is one final point that should be addressed before moving on. While the heart is the dominant perceptual tool of uniting energy, with feeling as the dominant language of that energy, and the mind is the dominant perceptual tool of separating energy, with thought as the dominant language of that energy, the heart is also very much capable of feeling separated, while the mind is very much capable of thinking in a united way. And there are a few perspectives to explain here. First, the mind is not the tool capable of connecting to pure consciousness. It is just not capable, at least on its own. Or really, period, it is not the tool. The heart is that dominant perceptual tool and is the mechanism by which we can tap in and connect to the soul or the source of all being. What this means is we cannot think our way to any full understanding or comprehension of the non-physical soul or pure consciousness level. And we certainly cannot think our way to connection to it. We can only feel it. However, once felt on the heart level, with heart consciousness, those feelings or that information can become understood on the mind level and become part of mind consciousness or mindfulness. What this also means is that if the heart level feels connected and united to the soul level, then the mind can understand this union and operate from a uniting energy dominance despite its natural tendency and dominance for the perception of separation, and therefore have uniting action dominance or action that contributes more towards union than separation. And this is actually really important. We will talk a little bit more about it in the final section of the heart. If the heart is not connected to the soul and feels no union to the source of being, then there is no unity consciousness in the heart, and there can't be unity consciousness in the mind. The heart then feels separated or disconnected or alone, and then the mind can only operate from this natural tendency or its natural dominance for separation, which can swiftly lead to individualism, selfishness, and really fearful living, which can also create anger and intolerance and really an extreme lack of success in life or obtaining the desired outcomes you want in life. Said a little differently, without heart consciousness or activation of the heart level, the mind can only operate from the perspective of separation. It has also already been explained and suggested how long ago the heart level in human beings was much more activated and engaged than it is now due to less mental development and therefore less knowledge and capacity for thought to rely upon. The heart naturally feels and will connect to or unite with its source of being when it is just allowed the space to do so. But as the mind developed more and more in the human being, with the availability of more and more knowledge to the point of relying only on knowledge and thought for the direction of our actions, heart consciousness and the ability to feel and connect has diminished proportionally. And this is where we are now as human beings. This will become clear as we continue on and really apply some of these puzzle pieces to some of the puzzle pieces we've already revealed, like the arcing trajectory of physical level motion and existence. But we generally have highly developed minds and an overweighted and imbalanced reliance on the mind for all of our energetic information. We have therefore grown into a less whole state of existence as a species than where we started. Although this will soon change, which is very optimistic. We will continue our trajectory of separation or separating energy to our apex and start to descend in uniting energy, which will put us in a heart-dominated state of existence, more and more as individuals and then as a species. But we'll get into that also a little further on. But now, let's continue with the mind and where we have come from, which leads to where we are going, because it's really all quite natural and all very optimistic. So in the next episode, we will actually begin a sort of three-part episode discussion on where we are, starting with the seasons, discussing again a little further the levels of being as they relate to the seasons, and then providing an educated suggestion on where we are as a species. So thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.